were there who wore a human form. Absorbed, they lived in the passion of the scene, but knew not who they were or why they lived. Ardent from the sack of happy, peaceful homes, and gorged with slaughter, plunder, rape, and fire, they made the human selves their helpless prey, a drove of captives led to lifelong woe.
Good morning, everyone. We're reading in Book 2, the Book of the Traveler of the Worlds. We're in Canto 4, the Kingdoms of the Little Life. And we're at the bottom of page 142, the second line from the bottom. So we're following King Aswapati in his inner travels through the inner worlds. He's gone into himself. He's exploring these inner planes of consciousness. And he started from the level of subtle matter, so a realm very close to our physical world, where form was the dominant principle, and a kind of perfection in form, a beauty and harmony of form. And now he's traveling through the kingdoms of life, the vital worlds. And he's beginning here in these kingdoms of the little life. So this is the emergence of life out of matter. And here we're following his journey, and he's coming to several different layers of this realm of the little life. And the first we read through already was a layer that was very close to matter, where life was just emerging out of matter. So that came at the beginning of the canto. I'll just read a short passage just from the very beginning on page 132. A quivering, trepidant, uncertain world, born from that dolorous meeting and eclipse, that's the meeting between matter and life, appeared in the emptiness where her feet had trod, a quick obscurity, a seeking stir. There was a writhing of half-conscious force, hardly awakened from the inconscious sleep, tied to an instinct-driven ignorance to find itself and find its hold on things. Inheritor of poverty and loss, assailed by memories that fled when seized, haunted by a forgotten, uplifting hope. It strove with a blindness as of groping hands to fill the aching and disastrous gap between earth pain and the bliss from which life fell. So we've seen that the plane that life has come out of higher worlds. It has descended and become life from the higher worlds. So that is the bliss from which life fell. And after this first emergence, that first layer, he came into another realm where there was a kind of freer movement of life. So that began on page 141. Then came a firier breath of waking life. And there arose from the dim gulf of things the strange creations of a thinking sense, existences half real and half dream. A life was there that hoped not to survive. Beings were born who perished without trace. Events that were a formless drama's limbs, and actions driven by a blind creature will. A seeking power found out its road to form. Patterns were built of love and joy and pain, and symbol figures for the moods of life. So now we're still within this realm, this middle realm. And so we can continue now on the bottom of page 142. So Turiya, would you like to begin?
A body that knew not its own soul within, there lived and longed, had wrath and joy and grief. A mind was there that met the objective world as if a stranger or enemy at its door. Its thoughts were kneaded by the shocks of sense. It captured not the spirit in the form. It entered not the heart of what it saw. It looked not for the power behind the act. It studied not the hidden motive in things, nor strove to find the meaning of it all. Beings were there who wore a human form. Absorbed, they lived in the passion of the scene, but knew not who they were or why they lived, content to breathe, to feel, to sense, to act. Life had for them no aim, save nature's joy and the stimulus and delight of outer things. Identified with the spirit's outward shell, they worked for the body's wants. They craved no more.
Thank you. as we go through these descriptions of these inner worlds, seems like there's a few layers of meaning that we can take from it. One is that he's describing the subtle planes of consciousness within. So he speaks of that here, when beings were there who wore a human shape. So he's referring to these other worlds, this inner world, that have beings who appear as if they have a human form. But at another level, it seems to describe our evolution on Earth and kind of a primitive humanity, like maybe the apes, the hominoids that were just kind of the precursors to human beings. So we can kind of look at it in terms of this earlier evolution here on Earth. And then I think there's still even another aspect to it, in that these subtle planes also have an impact on our own lives, on human beings, even now. And of course, there are human beings that are at a whole range of different development, very primitive human beings that are just emerging out of the animal state and are just concerned with their bodily wants and things like that, just like he's describing here, and a more advanced, developed humanity with a more developed mind and appreciation of the complexities of life and of beginnings of experience of the inner self. So we can look at it in all these different ways. But certainly it has hints for our own life, because these realms also influence even our behavior, and even for more developed human beings, we have this layer of being within ourselves as well. So we also forget to look within at times and become identified with our physical body and our physical wants and needs. Here there is a mind, but it's tied to the sense impacts from outside. So if something from within has a strong impact on the being, then the mind registers that and may respond to it in some way. So it's a mind, but it's very much tied to the outer senses. So a mind was there that met the objective world as if a stranger or enemy at its door. Its thoughts were kneaded by the shocks of sense. Kneading, like you knead bread, you kind of form the dough. You knead the dough. So its thoughts were kneaded by the shocks of sense. But it didn't look within, it didn't look deeper into the situation of others outside or of itself. So again, there were beings there that wore a human form, but they weren't completely human in a sense of being able to reflect on their own life or reflect on the situation. Content to breathe, to feel, to sense, to act. Life had for them no aim save nature's joy and the stimulus and delight of outer things. identified with the spirit's outward shell. They worked for the body's wants. They crave no more. Helmut, would you continue?
The veiled spectator, watching from their depths, fixed not his inward eye upon himself, nor turned to find the author of the plot. He saw the drama only and the stage. There was no brooding stress or deeper sense. The burden of reflection was not borne. Mind looked on nature with unknowing eyes, adored her boons and feared her monstrous strokes. It pondered not on the magic of her laws. It thirsted not for the secret wells of truth, but made a register of crowding facts and strung sensations on a vivid thread. It hunted and it fled and sniffed the winds, or sloth in earth and sunshine and soft air. It sought the engrossing contacts of the world, but only to feed the surface sense with bliss. These felt life's quiver in the outward touch. They could not feel behind the touch of the soul. They could not feel behind the touch, the soul. To guard their form of self from nature's harm, to enjoy and to survive was all their care.
Thank you. So this section just again is describing this outward sense, fixated aspect of the mind that appears here in this realm of life. So it's just absorbed in the outer scene, in the strong impacts that the outer world makes on the being through the senses. And takes delight in that, in those outward contacts of life. Enjoys the sunshine and the soft air. It made a register of crowding facts and strung sensations on a vivid thread.
What does it mean?
It just observes and fixes facts of nature, but it doesn't string them together and make a story out of it or try to understand the meaning of it. It just lists a whole series of facts of the way things are.
And the veiled spectator watching from their depth, what is there referring to? Outer things?
Their depth?
Line 404.
Yeah. So it's the being, their depth, these beings.
These beings. Okay.
So there's a being within looking out on the scene, on what their senses perceive, but it doesn't look within itself to see who is looking. Who am I? It pondered not on the magic of her laws. It thirsted not for the secret wells of truth. Doesn't try to understand the world around it. So the reflective mind that we have that tries to understand, look at itself, that is not developed as yet. Now we can continue. Would you like to read the top of the page?
The narrow horizon of their days was filled with things and creatures that could help and hurt. The world's values hung upon their little self, isolated, cramped in the vast unknown. To save their small lives from surrounding death, they made a tiny circle of defense. Against the siege of the huge universe, they preyed upon the world and were its prey, but never dreamed to conquer and be free, obeying the world power's hints and firm taboos. A scanty part they drew from her rich store. There was no conscious code and no life plan. The patterns of thinking of a little group fixed a traditional behavior's law, ignorant of soul save as a wraith within, tied to a mechanism of unchanging lives, and to a dull, usual sense and feelings beat, they turned in grooves of animal desire.
Thank you. He really characterizes this as a little life, to save their small lives from surrounding death. They made a tiny circle of defense against the siege of the huge universe. They preyed upon the world and were its prey. It's very much a kind of animal life.
Very much like us, huh?
Us too.
These lines from 430, when they prayed upon the word and they explained it's also much what is working now in the world. How on a higher level, when you think about all the through internet and buying and all these forces are not anymore on the nature lower level, but on a higher level. The process is quite similar.
Yeah, I think that this subtle realm of life has its impact on us. It influences us as well. It seeks for expression in our physical world as well. So wherever it finds an opening, it expresses itself, whether at the animal level or even at the human level.
When he says, but never dream to conquer and be free, he refers to the spiritual freedom?
I don't know that he's maybe, but I don't know he's specifically referring to that, but they're just more absorbed in the moment, protecting themselves, surviving. They're not thinking about any kind of long-term freedom or situation or conquering and enabling themselves to change their circumstance in a permanent way. Tied to a mechanism of unchanging lives, and to a dull, usual sense and feelings beat, they turned in grooves of animal desire. We can continue.
What is a wraith? Excuse me? Wraith?
Wraith is a ghost.
In walls of stone fenced around they worked and warred, did by a bandit selfishness a small good, or wrought a dreadful wrong and cruel pain. On sentient lives and thought they did no ill, ardent from the sack of happy peaceful homes, and gauged with slaughter, plunder, rape and fire. They made of human selves their helpless prey. A drove of captives led to lifelong woe, or torture a spectacle made an holiday. Mocking or thrilled by their torn victims' pangs, admiring themselves as titans and as gods. Proudly they sang their high and glorious deeds, and praised their victory and their splendid force. An animal in the instinctive herd, pushed by life impulses, forced by common needs, each in his own kind saw his ego's class. All serve the aim and action of the pack.
Thank you. Let's pause.
What is banded?
Banded is to group together.
And wrought is to win.
Wrought is to form, to make. You wrought iron, you bend it and turn it into a form that you want through force, a difficult matter that you're forming. Fortunately, we see this description playing out on the evening news even now. But something that's somewhat poignant about it is that this subtle world exists as a type, more or less through eternity, I think. So it's always there and pressing for manifestation even here. So that's what gives it this longevity, that this has been the way of life, for so many centuries. It's a persistent world that lives there and pressing for expression.
So why do you say it's eternal? Isn't it evolutionary? Isn't it changing?
No, not in this subtle realm. These subtle worlds are fixed, not evolving.
When Sri Aurobindo wrote this chapter?
Oh, I don't know exactly.
Anyway, there is a difference between sometimes the moment when he wrote and maybe many years later the moment he corrected and modified.
Yeah. But I want approximately, Shraddhavan knew everything.
Yeah, probably in the 30s, I would think.
Sorry?
Probably in the 30s.
Okay. Thank you.
Late in the 30s.
Because first he worked and reworked this part of the book for a long time, and then only towards the end he started on the last half of the book, or developed the last half of the book. Lifelong woe, lifelong suffering. So they led their captives to a lifelong suffering. Enslavement, we can think of that, So we'll continue. Madam, you can.
Those like himself, by blood or custom keen, to him were parts of his life, his adjunct selves, his personal nebulous constituent stars, satellite companions of his solar eye, a master of his life's environment, a leader of a huddled human mass, herding for safety on a dangerous earth. He gathered them round him as if minor powers, to make a common front against the world, or, weak in soul, on a different earth, as a fortress of his undefended heart, or else to heal his body's loneliness. In others than kin kind he sensed a foe, an alien and like force to shun and fear, a stranger and adversary to hate and slay. Or he lived his life the solitary brute. Or he lived as lives the solitary brute, at war with all he bore his single fate.
Thank you.
Absorbed.
Let's pause there.
But I just wondered if these worlds are eternal and ours is supposed to evolve and to escape that situation. And on another hand, I heard that all the forces want to be realized. Each one wants its own realization, which can bring to clashes. So these forces, they probably want to be realized. So if we evolve, they cannot realize themselves anymore in a world like ours.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if we're transformed at the high culmination of our development, of our evolution, then they wouldn't be able to express themselves in this way here, but still they could within their own realm. So we see the dominance of ego here, of this sense of oneself, but limited, and then surrounding oneself with others that are similar in order to give more protection against the outside world or to that which is different, to those who are different, to fight together. So we see it in the fighting between clans or between countries, between religions.
Can you speak a little bit on this? Stars and nebulas constituted stars, and especially Saturn the companions of his solar eye.
Which one?
Yeah, that's,
461, 462.
I think he's more or less giving an analogy to the solar system and to the universe. So his personal nebula's constituent stars, apparently a nebula is consisting of many different stars, but it's still separate from other constellations of stars, other galaxies. So it gathers around. So we see it, this formation of units, of groups, of individuals, even in physical nature, even in the development of the universe into galaxies and into solar systems. So that same principle gets played out in human life. We have our factions in Auroville.
The galaxy plan?
This is just the group egos, the
Yeah.
identification of any type of group egos.
Yeah.
Nationality, family, my group, my group. They're more angels. One mind and a group of minds.
But in a sense, then we can see that it has its place in the development, in the evolution, its necessity.
Huddled means grouped. Huddled, human mass. Group.
Huddled, you huddle together in a group, a small group, crowd together.
So it's really a very difficult fit for the human being to go against what the universe has already been living and embodying, because it's also a very poetic way of showing how eternity in a way, because the universe is not eternal, but certainly could be close to that, and it's always functioned that way. And so for us to overcome that takes a different human person. It's a different, the emergence of something totally different.
Yeah, the evolution proceeds very slowly and gradually. There's all this resistance to something completely new and different. So that's why it takes so long, even in our own development or especially in the development of humanity. We can continue.
At work with all, he bore his single faith, absorbed in the present act, the fleeting days. None thought to look beyond the hours gains, or dream to make this earth a fairer world, or felt some touch divine surprise his heart. The gladness that the fugitive moment gave, the desire grasped, the bliss, the experience won. Movement and speed and strength were joy enough, and bodily longing share and quarrel and play, and tears and laughter and the need called love. In war and clasp this life once joined the all life, wrestlings of a divided unity, inflicting mutual grief and happiness, in ignorance of the self forever one, arming its creatures with delight and hope. A half-awoken nations struggled there, to know by sight and touch the outside of things. Instinct was formed in memory's crowded sleep. The past lived on as in a bottomless sea. Inverting into half-thought the quickened sense, she felt around for truth with fumbling hands. Clutched to her the little she could reach and seize, and put aside in her subconscious cave.
Thank you.
So who is she to be sure?
Yeah, I'm looking for where it comes.
Huh?
Oh, at the end, she felt around for truth. Yeah, this is that nature. I think he might be referring particularly to instinct here. Instinct was formed. But it's this nature. Now, I didn't hear. Excuse me?
I said life instinct.
Oh, yeah. So he seems to be describing this absorption in the present moment rather than in the long term. Movement and speed and strength were joy enough, and bodily longings shared, and quarrel and play, and tears and laughter, and the need called love. So this was the predominant interest at this level of life.
And what is the all life?
The all life? Oh, in war and clasp, these life wands join the all life.
Interesting is also to recognize non-thought or to look beyond or dream to make this world a failure world. And or felt some touch divine surprises are this more higher thinking and feeling it's not there.
Right. Yeah, this all life, I guess just the other aspects of life other than these small longings and joys and pleasures, but it's through that it expresses the life principle, I guess.
The superior life?
Yeah, the larger realm of life. But it seems as if that larger force of life and its larger possibilities are more or less channeled in these small life wants and exchanges.
But Francis, in agenda, Mother said, is a necessity for this description of Sri Auroville for evolution and transformation. Is a beginning, but very, very, very early beginning. Because that is true. Go very, very, very slow. But very, very difficult sometimes. It was that somebody escape, somebody forget, somebody don't want Schrodinger and come back and escape and come back. Lot is like that, humanity. It was that this description is really, I understand now, after a long time. Some aspect, not everything, but I do like that. I receive in my unconscious, in my subconscious. But I put it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a very important aspect of ourselves and of the evolution as a whole.
It's very necessary, this part, for people understand and slowly, slowly do some inner work, which remember the mother, or the supreme, or divine. That's all. For me, is
And at the same time, it points to that level at which we have to transform also this. We have to experience this and understand it and change that. And that has to bring the light and the power of the divine into this level of our being.
Yeah, Kiribai, where is Auroville, is a chairman of Auroville 5 years. He tells Auroville is a place of transformation, not ordinary place. But you learn. First you learn, and you do, not forget. Sorry, but I remember this aspect of.
I wanted to ask about this last sentence here at the beginning, right? The first line at the beginning of page 146. Clutched to her the little she could reach and seize and put aside in her subconscious cave. So, like, there is a memory that is for, like, all these experiences, even tiny ones that she could, starting to form a memory, she's starting to form a pattern that then will be a mold where we see, we always repeat the past because we have this subconscious conditioning that drives our lives.
Exactly.
So I think, I don't know if this is my.
Yeah, the mind is not so conscious and developed here that it can retain all of this in its conscious awareness and utilize all this information, but it stores it nevertheless in its subconscious. And so that it learns from all of these experiences and can build upon it, but it's building still unconsciously or subconsciously. We continue? Would you like to read? No? Okay. Then we go to the...
Where are we, please?
Third line on 146.
So must the dim being grow in light and force, and rise to his higher destiny at last. Look up to God and round at the universe, and learn by failure, and progress by fall, and battle with environment and doom. By suffering discover his deep soul, and by possession grow to his own vast. Halfway she stopped and found her path no more. Still nothing was achieved but to begin, yet finished seemed the circle of her force. Only she had beaten out sparks of ignorance. Only the life could think and not the mind. Only the sense could feel and not the soul. Only was lit some heat of the flame of life, some joy to be, some rapturous leaps of sense. All was an impetus of half-conscious force, a spirit sprawling, drowned in dense life foam, a vague self-grasping at the shape of things. Behind all moved, seeking for vessels to hold, a first raw vintage of the grapes of God. On earth's mud is filth of the supernal bliss, intoxicating the stupefied soul and mind, a heady wine of rapture, dark and crude, dim, uncast yet into spiritual form, obscure inhabitant of the world's blind core, an unborn Godhead's will, a mute desire.
Thank you. So in these first lines here, he expresses what Ganga Lakshmi was saying about how this was necessary, a necessary stage. So must the dim being grow in light and force and rise to his higher destiny at last. So it's a stage that has to be gone through.
I have a question. You said when these are title words, they're not evolutionary. So they existed even before anything happened on earth, when there was complete inconscience, or did these words came to exist because of the evolution on earth?
No, the typal worlds are created in the involution, in a descent from the higher realms. But when it gets down to the base, to the physical, it touches matter at a certain point, descends into matter. And then the evolution arises from that meeting point, or in that meeting point of life and matter. And so that's what he begins to describe at the beginning of this canto, that early first emergence of life out of matter. And he's describing this as this meeting point between life and matter. So in that sense, I can't say necessarily whether it's one or the other, because it includes influences of both.
So when Mother says, I mean, when the supramental transformation takes place, and this transformation that works in any individual, it works on the subconscious, on all the levels, including these levels. So isn't it that when it works in the individuals on earth, that the worlds that exist and they carry these things, the worlds of subconscious and little light and lower levels of consciousness, they also should eventually change, and that is the whole work that will change the complete the world themselves. I don't know, because that's my question. Because
Yeah.
changing
Does the whole creation undergo this transformation, or only Earth? That's the kind of question. My understanding, I'm not sure whether this would extend into the subtle planes of consciousness, but I don't know. Anybody else know? I think if we get far enough that it happens on Earth, that will be sufficient for the moment. Whether it's going to expand outwards into all of these other realms, I don't know.
I think there is an effect because even if you see normal evolution on Earth, Shriram has described there are different types of asuras and different types of animal, before even animal humanity came, the long process of evolution and cleaning and pranayas to get to this stage.
Yeah.
And my mother says she's working on inconscience and subconscious, and she had, I think Julie had put this question as well. And I think every conquest that is made because of this Shortenlos and mother's presence on Earth and the yoga itself on Earth now has an effect on the worlds themselves. And things are reduced there, and that's why consequently also is being affected on Earth, reduced on Earth.
Yeah, it may be.
I mean, it's also said that in every atom is a divine presence in it, and then of course get charged from the higher realm, and every atom gets a push there to go forward and to develop in the way.
But you see the divine in the atom?
The divine
just
presence in the atom is in the atom and working in the atom.
Okay, but he's maybe mind. No? Okay, sorry.
Just a divine presence everywhere. Otherwise, the divine is holding up the whole creation. Now, I have something very, very important. It is 503 and 4. By suffering, discover his deep soul. Okay, this knowledge of his work, that when suffering is there, we make more steps forward. But by possession grow to his own vast. That is, if you can look at this a little bit more. What is this? The possession? And then he grow to his own vast.
I suppose it's this, at this level of life, we slowly expand our reach, our scope of existence. Our life is expanded slowly by what we can possess, by what we can command and rule around us. Slowly we expand our being. It's still in an egoistic way. It's still tied to this sense of ourself and belonging to me as an individual. But through that process, we enlarge our being. We reach out into the universal existence. At some point, we need to surrender our individual ego to that larger being and become that. We can't really possess it all. Our ego can't possess it. Eventually we have to surrender our ego in order to truly possess it, to become one with it. But we can't do that from the beginning. As life is evolving, it does this in this incremental way.
Progress Because we can't do it.
Right.
Then we get more understanding, more insight.
Right.
And then our own personal evolution takes place, which affects all the other evolution because it's not separate.
Right.
Right?
Right. Yeah, whatever gains that we make, that is also affects those around us.
And so failure, mistakes, that's part of it. It's not necessarily, it's not a negative.
Right.
The way we perceive it, the right and the wrong, that is a misconception.
Yeah, Sri Aurobindo often says we learn more from our mistakes than we often do from our successes. Towards the end here, there's this interesting passage. Behind all, moved, seeking for vessels to hold, a first raw vintage of the grapes of God. On earth's mud, a spilth of the supernal bliss, intoxicating the stupefied soul and mind. So he seems to be referring to the delight of existence, this ananda, which is behind this life principle and behind its pleasures and pains, its groping and suffering. That it's seeking expression in the world, this ultimately the bliss of existence, but this is its first raw vintage. It's expressing itself through this kind of dark mixture of pleasure. Something spilled.
The wine got spilled.
It's spilling, it's mixing with the mud.
Right. So the combination is the solution for the evolution. This intoxication is the theme through the whole of Savitri.
How is that?
With the wine and then the soma, all these things that is some sort of stimulant. There's all this Bakken and all this Greek way of coming through, the tantric way, is through the whole thing, which is normally not acceptable to conventional spiritualities.
So this.
It can be induced by drugs, by alcohol, by all of these things. So he puts it seems to me, he puts it all together, everything, the whole human.
So here he's kind of describing that. It's coming from the supernal bliss of existence, but this is its first raw vintage.
And Mother called grapes Ananda.
Right.
So you have this crushing of the grapes by the gods, and this wine comes out that mixes with earth, that intoxicates you to wake up.
8 glasses of wine.
And in agenda also, I listen now, 1968, agenda Mademoiselle, suffering transform in ananda. Suffering transform in ananda.
I can't see.
Yeah, it's beautiful that the evolution and the involution by the drops of the grapes of God's wine falling down kind of are answered by the obscure inhabitant of the world's blind core. Yet blind, something rises from the core of it, as a picture of a seedling coming up, becoming aware, identifying itself by possession, finds its vaster self, grows into a vaster identity, and becomes permeated by God's bliss, as well as permeating the environment by its own existence, which must become vaster. And then all the trouble is being pointful and directs us all to the unavoidable future.
Okay. I think we can maybe read just the next section. So, Margaret? Oh, sorry. Oh, we can. Okay, go. Okay.
Okay, good. A third creation now revealed its face. A mold of body's early mind was made. A glint of light kindled the obscure world forth. It dowered a driven world with a seen idea and armed the act with thought's dynamic point. A small thinking being watched the work of time. A difficult evolution from below, all the masked intervention from above. Else, this great, blind, unconscious universe would never have disclosed its hidden mind, or even its blinkers work in distant man. The intelligence has but devised the cosmic scale.
Thank you. So we're starting a new section of a more developed mind coming into play. For this, I would like to read something from Shraddhavan, her commentary on this section. Following King Aswapati in his exploration of the world stare of planes of cosmic existence, we have seen the emergence of the life force, imprisoned in matter, first in very primitive life forms, and then the animal creation, which included beings who wore a human form but were not yet fully human. Now the poet will show us a first emergence of mind and thinking beings. This emergence of mind represents a new plane of existence, the beginning of a third creation. Living animal bodies have already been established. Now a mold of form is made to contain the body's early mind. This new development brings a glint of light, a first gleam of consciousness to light up the obscure world force which is guiding the development of the earth. That glint of light introduces a new capacity into the world. Dowered with means gave to or endowed with. this new consciousness brings into the animal world, so far driven only by material law and blind instinct, the seeing idea, the beginning of conscious will, so that action can now be guided and made more effective by thought. For the first time, a small thinking being is able to consciously observe the works of time going on in the world around it. How could this new development come about? The poet tells us that it was prepared by a difficult evolution from below in matter and the lower levels of life, which called a masked intervention from above. At every stage in evolution, there is this interaction, a preparation and a call or aspiration from below, which receives a response from above. If there had not been that call and the responding intervention, it would not have been possible for this great, blind, inconscient universe to disclose the power of mind consciousness hidden within it, and allowed the intelligence that devised the cosmic scheme to work in beast and man in the form of mind and thought. Blinkers were eye shades that used to be put on working horses in cities to prevent them from being distracted and alarmed by all the bustling traffic around them. They could see only what was directly in front of them. To work in blinkers means to have severely restricted vision. Without the call of a difficult evolution from below and the response of a masked intervention from above, the material universe would never have been able to release the mind power involved within it and the indwelling intelligence which has conceived the universe could not have been expressed on earth in conscious beings, even in a very restricted way. So it's interesting that Sri Aurobindo's conception of evolution is still quite different than the Darwinian one, in that it includes this intervention from above at each stage of the evolution. And then, of course, we're at this stage now where something beyond mind has been called down and has descended in response to that call and aspiration.
I think also how Sri Auroville describes the whole development on Earth. No? Then it makes for me also sense why it says in the Auroville Charter to be a willing servitor of divine consciousness because of this descent from above always, no? To correct things, to bring things forward, to develop things. No?
But I go also in the class of Rod himself, in Savitri Bhavan, he tells what Shraddhavan wrote about this evolution, about Darwin. I remember. He read Savitri and he explained, especially about Darwin.
So I think we stop there for today.
Where did we stop?
The intelligence that devised the cosmic scheme. That was the last line we read. On page 147 at the top.
Were there who wore a human form. Absorbed, they lived in the passion of the scene, but knew not who they were or why they lived. Ardent from the sack of happy, peaceful home, and gorged with slaughter, plunder, rape and fire, they made the human selves their helpless prey, a drove of captives led to lifelong woe.
Thanks to Sri Aurobindo.